we have accepted a commission from an art group in Sweden. At first they asked if we would not assist them and the new harbor in Stockholm, which billions of dollars are being spent on, and they're claiming to go green. And would we as a team, but me as the leader, give art a voice in this? So we went there for a week and thought it over and studied them. And we wrote a letter of refusal. We refused to help this situation in any way because I'm looking at greenwashing. I'm not looking at the way a city can move into biodiversity. I'm looking at fixing up trees and parks and enhancing the biodiversity in parks, but I'm not looking at large systemic thinking. And so I turned him down in a kind of elegant letter, but it was forceful. However, I end with, I'm willing to consider your country as a whole. And we sent them a proposal that argues that I can send you a copy of. Would you send her a copy of the Swedish proposal? Which I would like your magazine to publish. It's a 9-pager that will go in 4 pages in a magazine. And here it is, in short. With a 3 or more degree temperature rise and the increasing drought and erratic properties of the weather, all of which we have caused in good part, although there's systemic similarities to ancient things, ancient operations, but not this fast and therefore adaptable to. And so we argued that give us about 20,000 acres. 10,000 or 12,000 will go for a 200-year project that makes them back into the ancient forest that it once was. And is forageable. And from an economic position, it could make about 150 million a year in selling 150 foot tall giant trees that are overproducing. And therefore, they could make their money on that. And I don't expect that money to be worth much then. I expect trade to be operating again, which is another discussion, where I think I can prove through the laws of conservation of energy that capitalism will implode. We don't have to do anything except watch it die as we die, if we choose that, which looks like we are, with force if you're looking at Trump. It proposes then, with that ancient forest, a new type of farming that regenerates topsoil and is based on succession ecosystems, not on monocultures and monoculture of mind. And the third part would be herding, where you have polycultural herding, including the reindeer, and where the act of herding improves the biodiversity of the fields, which it once did before we overproduced and made monocultures out of things. Finally, there's a village about 12,000, something almost 20,000 people. And that whole operation would give back more carbon, take in more carbon than it uses, and give back into the atmosphere more oxygen than it uses, given the fact that oxygen is dropping in percentage-wise, and we're about to get in bad trouble if we keep this up, just in our breathing. So the third part is, how do you build such a village? And that's where the industrial argument comes in. We are proposing on how to build such a village in such a way that the web of life itself can consume it when we're finished using it. Now, the core operation here is to do nothing that does not benefit the life web in what you do. Like, for instance, the ancient forest, like the farming, like the school we would set up. And so that the authority we seek out and question and interrogate and collaborate with is the web of the 3.5 billion year old web of life. And therefore, when you say, well, what is artists' role in industry? It's very simple, if us artists can do it. First, most artists are not money driven. Most artists are not trying to increase capital. They're simply trying to live in order to be the freewheeling improvisers that the Bauhaus so well taught us. Thank you, Mr. Gropius, Mr. Albers, Feininger, et al. Helen and I were the first artists at the Bauhaus Dessau after the wall came down. Arbeiters there. Going back, our work as artists, since the industry can't hurt us, they can't. If I'm working with industry, they can't fire me. I'll leave before they get a chance. So we can't be controlled, and that's our virtue. And any other virtue is, well, maybe I'm smarter than some of those guys, but that's it. So unless the artist can take this role, then it's not interesting. You're just helping people support a collapsing regime. Now, why do I attack capitalism? I'm not attacking capitalism. Capitalism is attacking itself. Let me say how. So I'm just the appalled observer of a disastrous human mistake. The disastrous human mistake is when we shifted from trade to capital. Shifting from trading things back and forth to shifting things to capital and then trading is a little thing called the laws of conservation of energy. A well-known sort of senior high school physics, okay? And that simply says, when you change energy from one form to another, there's a net loss. In our book, I use a little watershed. I say, imagine the company chops down all the trees in the watershed. It makes some millions of dollars from the chop down. It has transformed the energy of the watershed into capital. But let's look back at the watershed. The watershed now does not have the energy to continue being the watershed it once was. Rain is washes out a lot of the topsoil, it's not being held. The sun is hitting the rivers hard so that the fish who need shade from trees don't live. And lots of species that lived in trees and elsewhere can't. And on top of that, the forest is no longer sucking in carbon in the amounts it once did and no longer releasing oxygen. So the net loss there exceeds the net gain that you have from changing a section of it into capital. You would think that's enough. Not enough. They then take that capital and make it into houses or something. Well, you've therefore changed your energy into another form yet again. So you have so capitalism generates a double loss every time it extracts. So what do you think that's going to mean? But the degeneration of all systems. The Bucky Fuller people a couple of years ago asked us why we didn't apply for their Fuller grant. It's the most important design request in the country. And so we said, okay, we'll do it. Although the reason we don't compete is because our agenda is so different from everybody else's that often we're treated with great respect, but given second place so that they don't have to do it and they don't have to pay us anything. So they solve their conscience and continue wrecking the environment a little slower. So we proposed to the Fuller people that what we needed to get funding for was to generate the group that would start an analysis of the large systems of the world and start entropy reduction system by system globally, beginning with the ocean. They liked this so much that they gave us second place. They were scared of it so much that they wouldn't grant it. Some variation of business as usual will continue, and systems will continue to be asked to give more energy than they can, and therefore will have less energy on their own part to continue being systems. And then the long-term goal of this, ecosystemically, is that when a system simplifies like that, it simplifies to save itself. And the process of simplification in due course, system by system, means that what we ask for it, they won't give. They won't be there to give. So we'll be looking at disease. You know why, of course. Let me say why. Maybe your audience doesn't know. When you have deep disturbance in the environment like we have, when you have heat coming in and many systems breaking down, when you have that much stress, the larger mammals like ourselves are much more endangered because it's hard for us to change. But the tiny little things like the bacteria and the virus, even microorganisms like paramecium, that function by bifurcation, even small things like that can evolve very rapidly and therefore can meet this stress. And that's why my virologist friends think that things like AIDS coming down the pike are going to be much worse than our ability to deal with them. And so I think that vast population control will happen. And this is Gaia's or nature's, or actually the life web's response to generating population, to the population of an overpopulation of a species that kills everything before it. Like we function as an exotic in all of our being. So what to do? What we're doing is what we call counter-extinction work. If you look at our Swedish proposal, you would see that to do it requires a new kind of governance, and it requires a new kind of education, and it debates entirely the idea of specialization. We go back to the pre-literates, to the early folk who inhabited the planet successfully, like the Washoe up in our way, or even the Tongva, the Gabrielino, even the Tewa in New Mexico. These are folk we've worked with in some measure. And if you took a look at, say, an Amazon kid of 10, they would know 5,000 to 8,000 species. They would know how to make a house, to make their weapons, to eat, to find curative medicines for if they got fungus or something. So that by the time a kid was 12 or 11, they were a generalist. And they became particular when a skill would come up. Yes, somebody could make arrows better than anybody else, and things of that sort. But but the first thing you were was a generalist, and that's what guaranteed your survival. Here, our guarantee of survival with modern industry has taken the generalist away, made everybody either monoculturally impaired or an expert of some kind. And therefore, the more expert you get in A, the less expert like you get in B. And therefore, communication between fields and academia is not so easy. Now, let me shift back to your questions about Black Mountain. We owe him a debt. Actually, in 1960, I think, or 59, 60, I met Albers, and he saw I was a sculptor. I was apprenticed to a sculptor at 14, 15, and could make life-size figures at 16, I think, and a 30-piece mold at 17. So I was pretty skilled. I was studio skilled right out of the Renaissance, the early Renaissance. I would say Cennino Cennini, not Vasari. And so I could do everything that had to do with the studio. Oh, incidentally, I refused to study with Albers because he said, "Ah, boy, you have to change completely. I have to accept you because of your talent." But even at 19, I wasn't going to be boy by anybody. So we parted company for a decade. And then I started teachers course, and things changed. So Black Mountain had everybody interacting. Well, when I took chair of the department, UC San Diego, our department had in it, I brought on Alan Capro, David Anton, the poet, and the poet critic was there. Ellie Anton, his wife, I had hired against the rest of the university, but she had a show at MoMA, and what were they going to do? And so I got through the sexism at the university. And then we invented, I also had to release about 7 or 8 people because we were having a big fight about ideas. And ultimately we came to a conclusion that we would behave as if there was no difference between disciplines. So we didn't have an art history program. We had, to quote Sheldon Nodelman, a really good art historian, we have a histocrit program, where it is history, criticism, and at the same time, when all our MFA programs had art historians, critics, painters, and a scientist or two on the committees. So we actually enacted that as a conceptual art group for a decade or 15 years very successfully. But like all such programs, they have a short life. They tend to live for the power of the people in it. When they pass, it's almost impossible to pass the sensibility along. Hence, Black Mountain couldn't continue, although it surely influenced Rauschenberg and all those folk. Back to EAT and Billy Kluver. I didn't like Billy at all. Why? Well, because he had the same problem that Bucky Fuller had, whom I did like. He came out of science, which he proclaimed, basically physics and engineering. When you come out of physics and engineering in that period, in the 60s, you have contempt for biology and ecology as being lower disciplines. So I, coming in with the ecosystemic thinking with Helen back in the late 60s, early 70s, was offensive to him. He didn't like it. Moreover, his love of technology, I thought was a dead end. So I don't like his. So that didn't mean that what Kluver and the EAT people did was anything but very important. It broke new boundaries. It got artists to look at new things. It got industry to look at artists differently. And it got collaboration thing. And they all, like in the art and technology show with Tuckman, which I was in, the only problem with it was that people confuse science and technology. And technology is about solving problem, and good science is about discovery. So if you take a look at the art and technology show, there wasn't a whole lot of discovery in it, although there was a whole lot of technology in it. My work at Jet Propulsion Laboratories had discovery in it, as did my brine shrimp piece. But that's separate from that. I had 3, maybe 5 terrific experiences. About 1969, I do an artificial aurora for the American Pavilion in Expo 70. This tosses me right in the middle of art and technology and art and ecology. So mostly art and technology. I was at the American Pavilion. See, there was a competition there. In the American Pavilion were the key artists for Maurice Tuckman's Art and Technology show in 71. They were myself, I think Lichtenstein, Warhol, I forget who they were. There's about 5 or 6 of us. 4 of us were very well known. I wasn't, and one of the other guys wasn't. Let me say there were no women in it. The only woman in the whole art and technology show was Helen, who I brought in to help collaborate with the brine shrimp piece. So, but that's unheralded yet. So going back to art and technology. So Tuckman, when I tell him what I'm going to do, and he sees this glow discharge in a discharge chamber, and he knows that what it's going to look like, it's going to be a zinger. And so he puts me with Dick Feynman, Richard Feynman. So Feynman already just got his Nobel, and the Feynman papers were astounding everybody. And so we get to talking. I like him a lot. He likes me pretty much. But he explains to me that he's not interested in what I'm doing. Why is that? He says, well, it's baby talk physics, you know. It's just solving a problem. You just shows it a little bigger than most, that's all. We really have to find out what happens with the interaction of electrons and things of that sort, and subatomic particles. So he also was a portrait painter, and I saw a number of pretty good portraits he made. I liked him quite a bit. It took me 10 years, but later after about 8 or 9 years, I got to understand his basic notion, which was a sum over the histories of the movement of an electron. And so that really interested me a lot. I understood what he was doing, and I understood why he would fail, but why the failure would be extremely interesting and valuable, because it would again take a look at indeterminacy. So I really liked what he was doing. So the next person I collaborated with after Dick Feynman, Richard, which was it? Who did I collaborate with that? No, mostly I hit the books and collaborated and worked with many different scientists, but only in discourse. My next really lovely collaboration was with Wilhelm Bartlett. Wilhelm won he was the head of the ecology group. He was the head of the big botanical gardens in Bonn, Germany, and the head of their research group, and had won the German Ecology Prize, which is a separate story I'll talk about in a little bit. I had just got out of Documenta. Von Weizsäcker, the president of Germany, had liked our work so much in Documenta that he insisted that we go to Berlin and get the Berlin, and so we got the Berlin Fellowship and began designing in Berlin for a year. But after which it's a separate and very funny story where I met the next botanist that I could work with, named Hartmut Ehrn. But anyway, Bartlett gave us, the head of the Kunstnausstellung made an appointment, and Bartlett thought it would be another couple boring artists. So he gave us 5 minutes. And when he found out what we were going to do, he gave us a 2-hour lecture. He gave us his slides. He gave us his research. And we got the work done. And that's how come we were able to more powerfully do a work which was called the Endangered Meadows of Europe. We were doing this next to Parliament in Germany to see if we couldn't get the German government to legislate the regeneration of a pattern of the ancient meadows where the biodiversity of Europe resided. And when we cut all those back and we fertilized them, we got them down to 1 or 2 species of plants that would make the animals grow more quickly. We killed the whole biodiversity of the continent. That made a continental mini extinction based upon the fertilizer nitrogen and phosphorus a bit, and based upon a very costly belief. As a matter of fact, we ought to be doing belief analysis and finding out how much such beliefs cost. This belief was that you had to maximize profit and you had to maximize production. Nature doesn't do that. The life web does not scale up to the expense of everything else. a particular species that's more valuable in the life web than any other. And that's how come you can have a global collaboration of millions of subsets of micro systems. That is, after all, your pancreas is a microsystem all on its own. Mine has annoyed me. I have late onset diabetes. Kidneys are also annoyed at me because the diabetes affects the kidneys. So I have to adapt to that. And I have. I'm 87. So at any rate, you're getting it. You get how you think in all this stuff. So you get why, if we don't become yet, the human race, another niche in the life web, the life web will expel us. It has to. You see, for it to survive, we can't survive with our present beliefs and the present actions. And how will it expel us? Simply by becoming more and more simple and less available for our use. And moreover, it will overproduce organisms that can kill us, like the virus. So between the virus, starvation, and bad behavior of humans to humans anyway, we can't make it. So that's why all of our work, every bit of our work, takes up the issue of the last almost 20 years now, takes up how we will survive this and what changes need to be put in place for us to survive at all. The most interesting part of this is another scientist that I've worked with since childhood, almost, a guy named Renil Sedanaika. Renil is the grandnephew of Dudley Sedanaika, who founded the country. So when I was doing the fish farm in London, I met Renil, and he was a kid, very bright. And he was interested in what we were doing because he was interested in fish farming for his country. And so we invited him over, and then he solved a big problem for us. And I got him into Scripps Institute of Oceanography. Renil and I co-work about once every 6 or 7 years. He's one of the greats, in my opinion. Way underestimated. But I dare you to ask him a question about how any system works, and see and watch him pull out the paper he's written on. So there you have my science responses. There are many others, but they operate in this way. If we cannot collaborate and do something original, I'm not interested in doing it at all. 2, I am absolutely uninterested in illustrating your brilliance. I don't give a fuck what it is. What we have to be doing is inventing something collectively that we never would have done individually. And that's what I've done with all scientists. We have this idea. We found out that the West Germans are sending their garbage over to East Germany, and the East Germans are paying them. They're paying the East Germans. The East Germans are making a double profit. They're grinding it up and putting it back into the Spree River, which runs back through West Germany. So I said, this looked like a pretty good subject matter for work. And so Ern looks at me with contempt. Trivial, he says, trivial. Now, I happen to know what trivial means in science because I've been on the review committees. I've actually reviewed perhaps 2,000 scientists' work when I was at the university on a committee. And so I know I'm about to get insulted, but it's likely to be useful insult. And anyway, Helen's there, so I won't get too angry. And so he says, we have to go to Yugoslavia. Why do we go? It's like 1979, 89. It's like 1989, before Milosevic. He was just as Milosevic was starting. So off we go. So I say, okay. So we got on we got 3 airplane tickets, fly to Zagreb, and he takes us immediately to a nature reserve. The nature reserve is outside of Zagreb, on the way up the mountain to Ljubljana. And it's like a couple hundred square miles of floodplain. And it's as the floodplain that existed as the no man's land between the Russian, the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the, what was the other one? The people that were attacking them. It'll come to me in a little bit. And so what was there was, all the endangered species was there, and the farming was tuned to the ecology. And so that, and the storks, which were a bioindicator, were there. And so I learned a lot. And he taught us a lot of history. And he taught us, and then he said, I didn't know artists did, we come into the sewage factory, the sewage there, which is going in from a fertilizer factory, is very poisonous. So we meet the head of this fertilizer factory, and I begin the discussion with him, also with Helen, of heavy metals and why aren't they? Why do we have a square kilometer of water 4 feet deep that's battery acid? He says, we can't do anything about it. And anyway, you're an artist. How come you know about this? And I said, I probably know more about what you do than you know about what I do, but I'm not going to take the time to teach you. Nor do I think you are interested to ask me. So just accept it. And so he did, and we did. And we then made a proposal for the whole nature reserve. And the nature reserve didn't need us. They had already solved their problems. So Hartman had brought us there as an insurance policy, earned it. And they didn't need us. So we wrote him a letter of congratulations. But since we were funded, we said, what else can we do? And the nature reserve was a little bit endangered by the Sava River, which ran through it and was polluted. So we took on the Sava. And if you look at the work called, I guess it would be the Sava River work, you would find what we did and why we did it. But the funniest thing that happened was that I guess Ern knew that we had told her that we had been Jewish. And he said, well, I didn't know Jews did this kind of thing. Actually, that we should have been bankers or something, right? I thought, well, how can I get this poor guy off the hook? Because I'm not going to give him a lecture on incipient anti-Semitism that's well meant. So I said, well, Dr. Aaron, there are two kinds of Jews. One kind of Jew is a desert Jew, and the other kind of a Jew is the urban Jew. And Helen and I, we're desert Jews. And we desert Jews have to understand the ecology to survive. He said, oh, how interesting. And now he's promoted that idea for the last 30 years in Germany. So we'll see what happens. I'm waiting for it to come back to me. But so far, nothing. So things like that happen. Life is full of amusements. It's not all this serious baloney that happens because you say art, technology, serious stuff. There's a lot of play in it. The second piece of play that was interested that way, like when Wilhelm Bartlett was competing for the German Ecology Prize, and our names were put in too. And he was very generous, and he said, Newton, why don't you let him know you're Jewish? You play the Jewish card, it would help you win. And so I said, come on, we wouldn't do that. Cut it out. So he didn't do it, and he won, not us. But he should have won, because in my judgment, he had focused success on a really original piece of experimentation, and we were generalized and outside of the nature of the competition. So we would have been lucky if we won. We would have had to have a couple of, we'd have had to have E.O. Wilson on it or something for us to have won. So that's the kind of stuff my life is made up of, and so is Helen's. It's not it's full of amusement, it's full of transactions, it's full of the humanity of things. It's not, and the problem that you face is everybody's all problem solving. I'm not all problem solving. I'm a random moving curiosity in the world itself, accepting whatever happens to me and making trouble where I can, which is often unpleasant. Also, as a kid, I'll talk about that a little bit. I come from a manufacturing family. My grandpa was very close to, was named Simon Farber. He invented a thing called Farberware, pots and pans and that kind of stuff. Made 1 million machine gun rings a day and that kind of stuff during the war. And so I was really pressed to be an industrialist. And I really knew I was an artist, and I turned him down and returned any benefits I had from them. So, and apprenticed myself to a sculptor, and that was that. There are other funny incidents in my life that might be are aside. There I am in art school, and I'd already tried the Leonardo bit, went and worked on cadavers with my medical school roommate, and found out that I didn't need to find that stuff out so much. And I get pulled into the army for the Korean War. So I tell them I'm a model maker, I can do all this stuff. And they say, no, we're going to make you an MP. Why are you going to do that? Well, in Korea, the MPs are shot more often because they're on street corners, directing traffic, and they make good targets, so we got to produce more of them. And you're just right for it. You're the right height, you could read, you can write, and you're articulate. Yes, sir, we want you in the MPs. And I'm thinking, this is not a very good future for me. So the war ends. And our unit is then sent to deploy to forts in the United States. I am deployed to Fort Totten. And in Fort Totten, which is right next to the Whitestone Bridge in New York, I become so frustrated being an MP that I shine my equipment a lot. They think this is a sign that I should be a corporal immediately and that I'm going to run up the ranks fast, that I'm really gung-ho. Meanwhile, I'm not gung-ho, I'm bored out of my skull. And so they give me a car to drive around. And so I think to myself, how can I entertain myself? And so I drive around this car, and I thought, I know what? I'm going to hold the general to the highest standard. So, and then I'm going to hold the colonels to the next to highest standard, and everybody else we'll worry about later. So they better obey the law. So I follow all colonels and the general around until I can give them tickets. Now, I give the general a ticket. The general can't fucking believe he's gotten a ticket. So he runs down to the provost marshal, the guy named Zalagowski. Amazing, I remember these names. Who's got a sense of humor. And he says, tear up the ticket. So Zalagowski calls me and he says, Private Harrison or Corporal Harrison, the general don't like a ticket. You're going to tear it up. I said, I can't tear it up. It would be unethical. And I'm also lying because I could tear it up. And he said, what would it take to get you to tear it up? Looking for an appropriate bribe. So I said, well, you can see that I'm misplaced in the MPs after all. Here's your evidence. Your general is your evidence. And he said, what is the proper place for you in the Army? I said, why the post-craft shop, where I can teach people how to do sculpture, which I have expertise in. So why shouldn't I do what I do best? He said, okay, I'll get you in the post-craft shop, but first you've got to paint all the white lines on the since you're a painter, a sculptor, and so I painted all the white lines in on the base, and then I went to the post-craft shop. The general, forgetting that I gave him a ticket, suddenly decides I'm the post-sculptor, and an order comes down. The post-sculptor will produce life-size Jesus, Mary, Joseph, 1 creche, and 1 donkey for Christmas, which is like 3 months away. You got to see it. So I write him back a letter saying I've been trained to do Jesus, Mary's, Joseph's, and creches, but I have not been trained to do donkeys. So comes back an order. the postcard, the post sculptor will do Jesus, Mary, Joseph, creche, etc. One donkey omit. So I buy a ton of plaster, set up my armatures, and make it. And I get a team of young artists, young people, also misfits. And us misfits make them Jesus's, Mary's, and Joseph's, life size. And I made them in 3 parts, so you could put them in the basement and put them out on Christmas time. The Getty was negotiating with us for our archive, only somewhat enthusiastically. And I'm uncomfortable about it because they would make Helen and me an art tower, like we're the ecology artists. John Baldessari is the conceptual artist. Alan Cackrell, legislative, is the happenings artist, and Ellie Anton is something else. And so Stanford comes by, and they find out that I'd worked with Yorgi Kepish on the '69 Biennale, and they took our archives. So I chose them over the Getty. And this seemed like a bad move, because Getty's powerful and Stanford's not. Yeah, but I said that the reason they seduced me, and they seduced Helen too. Why? They're going to put us between Yorgi Kepish and Bucky Fuller in their archive. Why, they've located us appropriately intellectually. And the other people just were using us as an instrument to fill in a slot. So that's the way we've always thought. Also, we have a working principle. It's called first come, first serve. And that is, if a small university museum in Idaho wants us to do something, and Loma wants us to do something, and New York and the Idaho came first, they get first choice. And we've behaved that way ever since. So that should cover us. What I want you to do is do good with your magazine, because sooner or later, some of the industries will figure out that's what they got to be doing. And those are the industries that will help us survive and in turn help themselves.